All right, Nietzsche. First time with Nietzsche. So, like usual, we do our poll to see how you guys survive the experience. So, I'm going to put on gallery view. All right. 10 is ecstatic, 1 is horrible. Any 10s for Nietzsche? Oh, okay. Alim, of course. 9. Any 9s? Okay. Wilkes, is that you? All right, 7. I mean, sorry, 8. Okay, not bad. A lot of you like him. 7. Now let's come to the haters. 6, 5. Oh, yes, Karibai. 4, 3. Oh, Subhankulova. 2, 1, 0. All right, let's start with the haters. So Subhankulova and Yes Karibai, we are ready to listen to you. Whoever wants to go first.
His writing, he doesn't analyze his point. It was hard for me to kind of understand, but also he says God is the enemy of life. I feel like, what did he believe in if he doesn't believe in God or the science? So that's my question.
Question, right? It's hard to figure out where he stands, right? He's shifty, right? So yeah, like I said last time, right? Nietzsche is actually, he's against this kind of Christian God, the way God was depicted, right, by Christianity. Doesn't make him, right, somebody who is not spiritual, right? Because in many of his writings, he actually talks about two deities, right? He talks about Jesus a lot, and he talks about Dionysos. Let me write that word down, which we'll talk about maybe today. Actually, Dionysos, who is the Greek god of wine, right? Intoxication, nature, right? What else? Chaos, right? This is so he actually has some attraction, right, to this kind of spirituality, the spirituality as embodied by Jesus, which we'll talk about today a little bit, and then the Dionysian, right, spirituality. But when it comes to the way that Christianity, that traditional Christianity has depicted God, he's done with that, right? Does that make sense, Subhankulova? Are you there? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
All right. Yes, Karibai, you're next. What happened?
I think I like his writings, but I got confused on many things about what he writes, especially the peaceful soul. I didn't understand that part.
Let's talk about that. Everybody mentioned that. Where is that? I want to look at it. Exactly. A bunch of you mentioned it, and I was like, oh, I want to ask about that. I forgot like where that's found. I don't remember this. Oh, here it is. At the end of page 54. Oh, the whole paragraph. Oh, nice. Okay. Okay, let me read a little bit. This is interesting. Let's all go to this page 54, everybody. We're going to try and understand the peace of soul. I'm curious too. The gentle radiation. Oh, I see. Okay. All right, the peace of soul. What he's describing here in that whole paragraph, right, on page 54, is really life, right, in all of its little moments of pleasure, right? You have the, you know, kind of like the evening, he talks about a good digestion, he talks about getting over sickness, little things like this, right? He's contrasting here to the peace of soul taught by Christianity, right? And Christianity, maybe some of you know, how do we attain peace of the soul in the context of Christianity? Anybody remember? What's the teaching? How do you become peaceful according to Christianity? Anybody know? What's the path to peace that Christianity teaches? What do you have to give up to find that peace? Yes, very good, Critchell, right? Christianity in many ways is similar here to the kind of Eastern religions, right? You have to give up desire to be at peace. You have to give up all of your attachments, right, to everyday life. And then, you know, when you've surrendered everything to God and God is the only thing that you desire, then you have peace, right? This is the Christian path. Also, by the way, Eastern religions have a similar dynamic, right? You leave behind your worldly attachments. That's when you find peace. Here, Nietzsche is saying, no, no. I can find peace just in the small, ordinary moments of life, right? They're so, when you really live them, they are so extraordinary, right? And I think this is coming from someone, right, who suffered throughout, right? So he was always in a state of pain. And so for him, right, these little moments where maybe you have some, you know, relief from pain, you watch a sunset, you're just digesting well, these are the moments that bring us deep peace, right? So this is kind of Nietzsche saying, you can find deep peace in this life by really seeing it as amazing at each moment. Does that make sense? Yes, Caribai, do you see what he's doing?
Yes. Yes,
So
thank
that's the idea, right? It's also kind of a philosophy of the present moment, which you also see in Eastern religions, right? To kind of just enjoy the present moment and be present with whatever is going on without your mind full of, you know, obsessive thoughts about the past or about the future. Just enjoying and receiving life in the present moment can itself, right, if you're capable of doing that, if you discipline yourself to do that, this can become a source of deep peace, right? So okay, so yeah, I wanted to look at that because a bunch of you brought it up, right? So and I had forgotten what it was about, so now I got to review. Okay, let's go to a couple lovers of Nietzsche. There were a lot of you. I think there was Wilkes, and someone else was even on higher. Who were you? Alim, yes, Alim and Wilkes, and then whoever else wants to jump in. Nietzsche lovers, why do you love him so much?
Like you said, he struggled a lot in his own life, and he didn't really get to really enjoy what life is for life. And like when he realizes, well, I don't know if you did realize, but when he's like really sick, he writes really passionately as if he wants to like set other people free to um enjoy the life that they have right now, instead of um like making themselves like stuck in like a cave like Plato, I think. And yeah, he wants to set people free through his writing, and you can really see that, and I think that makes his writing really beautiful.
Okay, good. Absolutely, right. I read that in your response, and I thought that was a really nice reading of Nietzsche, right? Absolutely, right. He is himself incapable of tasting these little moments, right? Because of the chronic pain, right? So he is in a way saying, you know, looking at everyone around him and being like, live, you know, you can enjoy this, right? Why don't you enter life in a way that I will never will be able to, right? So I really like that kind of analysis. Very good. Wilkes, or whoever else, did you want to add to your love, to the love?
I too really liked how he said that, and I really like the part of the piece of soul that we just went over. And I just really like, in general, philosophies of the present moment. And there was this one line on page 52 where Nietzsche said, "We no longer admire dentists who pull out the teeth to stop them hurting." So it kind of showed the example of like how people don't necessarily like to go through their pain. They kind of just not like they just don't want to be in that present moment. And you know, I can understand how like in Christian faith, like, you know, we just look for like a quick fix, or like, you know, looking into the afterlife will be okay, but it's not, like, it's kind of ignoring suffering in my opinion. So I mean, I just like his philosophy in general.
Yeah, very good. And just to add, this, we're not going to look at that concept today, but I want to talk about it briefly, the concept of happiness in Nietzsche, right? This is something which is really interesting, because for Nietzsche, happiness is not to be mixed up with comfortableness. Let me write it down. So happiness for Nietzsche is not, right, to be comfortable, right? happiness for Nietzsche is being able to dwell in life in all of its ups and downs, right? In other words, you are appreciating life when it's bright and you're appreciating life when it's dark, right? The ability to receive life as it comes to you, whether it's the pain that life brings you or whether it's the joy that life brings you, this ability, right, to receive life, to receive everything that comes your way as a gift, right? This is the key to happiness for Nietzsche, right? So I like what you're saying, Wilkes, right? That he's not saying happiness means hoping in an afterlife, right? You can be happy now, even if you're suffering, right? If you take this suffering as a gift, as a way, and we've seen, right, with Rumi, how suffering can be a gift, right? But if you receive life in all of its complexity, right? If you embrace all of its aspects, that is when you will be really happy, right? So this is very profound, right? This way of thinking. Yeah, so Alim is connecting it to Job, right? Absolutely, right? Job became a full-fledged human being only after he suffered, right? And that's what Nietzsche is saying. Let's be full-fledged human beings. Let's not try to hide in a little corner when something goes, you know, when pain begins to enter our lives, right? Let's receive it. Let's welcome it as part of the experience of life, right? So that's another text, right? He talks about this, but I wanted to mention it because this philosophy of the present moment that Nietzsche is talking about is a philosophy of receptivity. I receive right now whatever life brings me. I don't try to escape, because that is the source of becoming a full-fledged human being and of being truly happy, right? According to Nietzsche. Very good. Okay, so we went on a big tangent. Now let's get into the text. So I'm going to be commenting only page 52, morality as anti-nature. Let me summarize a little bit what we talked about last time, and then we'll just go into the quotes. And then I'm going to try today actually to respond to Nietzsche from the Christian perspective. This text is easy to respond to. The text we'll do next time will take longer to respond to. But this one, I got this one. All right. So summary, right? So remember, right, what Nietzsche is criticizing in this text is this tendency of Christianity to despise life. And therefore, because they despise life, they despise what Nietzsche calls our passions, right? Or you can translate our desires. Any desire we have, Christianity is going to demonize that desire right away and say, don't have that desire. You need to. Why? Because desire is what draws us into life, right? So let me say that again, right? Number one, what Nietzsche doesn't like about Christianity is that it despises life. And we saw that, right? We can see this when you read some of the Christian scriptures, right? When they talk about don't be in the world and the world hates us and so forth, right? This concept of the world, right? As a bad place, right? As a place full of sinners, and we have to separate from the world. This is what Nietzsche is talking about. And this is truly indeed in many Christian texts, especially, this is important, in the text of Paul, which we'll talk about today. And we'll talk about which part of the Christian Bible this is in, right? So truly he is right in that level that Christianity despises life. And therefore, Christianity also distrusts and despises our desires for life. And so you could almost say, right, it's almost, one could make the argument that Christianity, each time there's a desire, it makes it into a sin. Let's see how that works. How many of you remember this? I think it's the 7, what are they called? The mortal sins. Anybody remember what the 7 mortal sins are? Okay, very good. Let's write them down. Envy, what else? Lust, very good. Pride, wrath, sloth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need 2 more. Greed. Gluttony. Okay, very good. All right. Envy, lust, pride, wrath, sloth, greed, gluttony. Notice how many of these mortal sins are actually desires, right? Let's take a look, right? Envy, it's a desire, right? Envy is a desire for what you don't yet have, right? You see that over there and you want that, though it's not yours, right? Yet. Lust, sexual desire, right? Desire for another person. Pride. Okay, pride less desire, right? Pride is the desire to be recognized. Pride is the desire to look good. Pride is the desire to keep up appearances. It's a desire still connected to how the outside world sees us. So it's also a desire. Wrath, the desire to strangle somebody when they do something which is annoying, right? Sloth, the desire to rest. Greed, the desire for more. Gluttony, the desire. Do you see? Why are the 7 mortal sins not, I don't know, killing, cheating? Why are they desires? You see? Do you see my problem? This is my issue, right? With my issue. It's not supposed to be my issue. This is Nietzsche's issue with Christianity, right? Why are the 7 mortal sins desires? This is strange, right? Why is it that Christianity has such a negative view of human desire as to demonize them into the 7 mortal sins, right? And that's where Nietzsche is suspicious, right, of Christianity. And his diagnosis is that Christianity despises desire and makes it into sins. Why? Because the desires is what draws you into the world. And the world is that from which we need to separate. That's the issue here, right? So Nietzsche, of course, is going to complain about that, right? He's going to say 2 things. Number 1, why is life so bad, right? Why does Christianity despise life so much? We're going to answer that question today, actually, right? And actually, I'm gonna argue back at Nietzsche, and I'm going to look at the original text of Christianity, and I'm going to focus on the text of the Gospels, and we're actually going to see that his criticism is, when it comes to the early text of Christianity, his criticism doesn't stand. It's the later developments of Christianity which became like that. And we're going to look at that today. We're going to look at the very early scriptures of Christianity, and we're going to see that they're very different from what Christianity became, and especially what Christianity looked like at the time of Nietzsche. So it's going to be interesting, right? I'm going to respond from those early texts. Okay. So that's the main issue, right? And of course, Nietzsche is going to say, well, Christianity or Christians hate life because they don't have the courage to live life. They don't have the guts to face life, right? And he's going to kind of send a few low blows about that. All right. So let's look. Okay, one last thing, sorry, the title, right? Morality as anti-nature. So obviously, right, such a morality which is constantly beating down on human desire is not natural, right? This is not natural. And Nietzsche is going to ask the question, why do we have to go against our nature to be close to God? Why do we have to leave behind the world that God put us in, right? Why do we have to leave behind our human nature, which is a desiring nature, in order to be a Christian? He's going to ask that question. He's going to challenge Christianity about that. Why is the world so bad? Why do we have to leave the world to be close to God? And why do we have to disembody ourselves, leave behind our human nature, which is infused by desire, right, in order to get close to God? Why do we have to be in such an anti-natural state, right? Okay, any questions so far before we get in the text? All right, so let's go to the text, and we're going to kind of go over what I said just now. You're going to find it in the text. So page 52, I'm going to read from the top. There is a time. Everybody there, wave at me in the screen. Put your hand on the screen. Okay. All right. So actually, in the beginning of this text, Nietzsche is actually going to agree with Christianity when it comes to, that's the only point where they agree. There is a time, he says, with all passions, when they are merely fatalities, when they drag their victim down with the weight of their folly. Okay, so he agrees actually that a lot of these desires that we have, when they become obsessions, they can kill us, right? Let's go back to the 7 mortal sins, right? Imagine you're a sloth to the extreme. What's going to happen to you? You're going to be stuck in front of the TV eating chips all day long. You're gonna die eventually, right? Of this, right? Or Suresh, right? Gluttony, the same. If you don't have control over your gluttony, you're going to develop all kinds of diseases. Same thing with lust, right? If you're out of control, you're gonna get into trouble. Same thing with greed, right? So he agrees. When these desires get out of control, they can kill us. But then where he disagrees is the method of dealing with these passions, right? Whereas Christianity says we have to destroy the passions because they're so dangerous, Nietzsche is going to give us a different path today, right? Okay, so let's take a look. Yeah, let's read a couple more. So, continuing on the next line, formerly one made war. Who is there? Put your hand in the screen. Okay, so now he's going to look at how Christianity handles these dangerous passions, right? He's going to say, formerly one made war on passion itself, right? One conspired for its extermination. All the old moral monsters, meaning moral philosophers, are unanimous that, and then he quotes the French, il faut tuer les passions, which means the passions must be killed, right? And then he quotes the New Testament, which he believes says the same thing. Okay, so that's the idea, right? So before we get into the path that Nietzsche proposes, right? Some of you are wondering, right? He's bashing, destroying. Well, what does he propose? He does propose a path, right? How to deal with our passions. I want to first respond to Nietzsche from the context of Christianity, right? In other words, make sure you write this down, right? Is Nietzsche right about Christianity on this point, right? And is Christianity really about destroying our passions, or at least early Christianity, right? So my strategy, so Nietzsche is right when it comes to the Christianity of his time. Yes, you see that, right? The 7 mortal sins is proof, right? The way that the church conceives of desire as a mortal sin, this is the proof, right, that Nietzsche is right in his criticism. But what I want to do today, the only way to help to respond to Nietzsche is to go back to the original text of Christianity. And for this, I'm going to turn to the Gospels. So, quick review about the Christian scriptures. Christian scriptures have two parts. One is the Gospels, and the other are the epistles. Okay, so let me explain. So the Gospels, these are simply four books which tell about the life and teachings of Jesus, right? All of you know about Jesus, I hope. The epistles is later. This is one apostle, one disciple of Jesus called Paul, who writes letters or epistles, right, to different churches. This is later, right? Okay, so these are the two main sections of the New Testament, right? I think I put it in the chat so you have the reference. Okay, you have the Gospels, there are 4 different Gospels, 4 different books, which talk about simply the life and teachings of Jesus. And then you have the epistles. Epistle means letter. And these are all of the letters that this particular disciple of Jesus called Paul wrote and sent to the different churches. Now, my way of responding to Nietzsche is to go back to the earliest texts, which are the Gospels, right? And interestingly, when you read the Gospels and when you study a little bit the personality of Jesus and his teachings, you will notice that actually what Nietzsche is saying doesn't apply there. It's very interesting. So I'm gonna show you, right? So here's a question for those of you who know. Does anybody remember the very first miracle that Jesus did before he even had all of his disciples put together? This is in the Gospel of John. Anybody remember the very first miracle he ever performed? What did it look like? And to give you a hint, this is in the book or the Gospel of John. And for the Dionysus lovers, yes, you will love it. Very good, Vargas. Turning the water into wine. So let me tell you this story, right? And there you will see something very interesting. First of all, you will begin to see connections between Jesus and the Greek god Dionysus, right? This is also interesting in itself. But you're going to see a kind of personality here that doesn't correspond to what Nietzsche is talking about. So here you have Jesus. Very early on, he's not yet Jesus. He's nobody, right? No one knows him. And he has made a couple disciples already, but not many. And it turns out he is invited with his family to a wedding. And he's just incognito. He's not nobody yet. No one knows him. And the wedding ceremony goes, and after a few hours, they run out of wine. And Jesus's mother apparently is part of the wedding committee, right? And she comes to Jesus and she's like, they have no wine. And Jesus looks at her and he's like, basically, so what do you want from me? Am I supposed to do a miracle? I'm not yet supposed to be, right? I don't feel that my time has come yet. She doesn't even answer. Typical, right? She goes and tells the servants, whatever he tells you to do, you will do. Now Jesus is put on the spot. So he goes to the servants and he says, all right, what do you have? They say, well, we have a lot of huge jars. We have big jars, but just of water. And he says, okay, take the jars into the banquet, into the party, and begin pouring the jars. Water. Okay, they just do it. They bring the big jars, they start pouring, and guess what comes out? It's easy. You can put in the chat. Wine. Very good, Cruz, right? So it's the first miracle, right? The water is changed into wine. Now, what does this tell you about the founder of Christianity? That he is at a wedding party, changing water into wine so that the party can go on. What does this tell you about the founder of Christianity? Very good, Alim, right? Yes. So Alim says, right, he follows his desires. Absolutely. Kirchel, he's chill, he's relaxed. I have a hand here with Heartstar. Go ahead, talk to us.
Yeah, I figured that that's what you were getting at, that he was following his desires, but like, I feel like who says just because they want wine and he's doing that for them? Like, first of all, like in a lot of religions, wine is a religious, like part of a religious practice. So who says like that's a desire? You know, I don't know.
Okay, good. Yes, good observation. This could be ceremonial, right? Actually, if you continue reading the gospel, he doesn't come out of character. In fact, in that particular gospel, the teachers, right, the main rabbis at the time, despise him. And one of the main reasons they despise him is that he's always at parties, right? And they call him literally a glutton, right? They call him, they basically, they don't like the fact that he's always partying. So we don't know this much about Jesus because the only thing we have about Jesus left is these crucifixes where he's sitting on a cross dying, right? So this is the image we have. When you read the text, however, you have somebody who is socializing, always at a different party, always drinking and eating, right? So this first miracle sets the tone to his ministry, to his work, right? Because he continues actually to be like this, to be hanging out with people, going to parties, and so forth. So the first thing we have when we study the Gospels, when you really read and look at the person, right, of Jesus, this is somebody who loves life. He's constantly eating and drinking and talking to people and enjoying life. And in fact, he's criticized for being too much of an Epicurean, right? People are saying he's a glutton and he's a fool, right? So that's the first thing we see. First, founder of Christianity actually seems to love life. Now, the second thing is even more interesting. What was Jesus's position with regards to human desires? What did Jesus do when people came to him with their desires? Did he say, you must rise above it? Why are you desiring this? You must pray to God only. Is that what he said? What did he say when someone came with a desire? Like, you know, I need to be healed or I need this to happen. And what did he do? Did he send them away? Anybody remember? Those who know? What was his attitude towards human desire? You can put in the chat or you can raise your hand. Was he telling people you should control your desires? You shouldn't have desires. What happened when someone came to him and asked him something that they deeply wanted, desire? What was his reaction? Let's see. Very good, Cruz, right? Actually, the position of Jesus, right, towards human desire was one of honoring that desire, right? Any human who came to him with a desire, he would grant, right? In other words, instead of rejecting and telling people to repress and give up their desires, he would actually honor their desires and grant them what they wanted. And so here you have something very interesting. If we take Jesus to be a divine figure like Christianity does, right? You have a concept of God who actually responds to human desire. And you have a concept of spirituality which is based on desire, because people come close to God because they have a desire, right? And they encounter God through this exchange, right? So it's as though here it is our desires lead us to God rather than separate us from God. Let me say that again, because this is very important, right? When you read the Gospels, you get the sense that our desires actually bring us closer to God. They're what brings us out of our houses, flocking, right, to Jesus, to that person, right, to that figure. So here you have a complete reversal, right? Rather than desire being that which separates us from God, desire is that which brings us closer, which brings us closer to God. And God, if Jesus is, if you see him as a manifestation of God, God in a way is receptive to human desire, honors human desire, grants human desire, right? So these are the two main points you get when you read the Gospels. And in that sense, we can begin to understand why Nietzsche was actually attracted to Jesus, even though he hated Christianity, right? Williams, go ahead.
I'm not sure. We usually don't well, that's from mythology, but don't usually when they grant their desire, it goes wrong so they can struggle and go through a whole process instead of oh, you just got something good from the desire. It's usually not that way.
So in the Gospels, you mean?
I mean, in general, that I heard usually you get a desire and you realize why you should never got it, or sometimes what's the saying, you ask for something that you should never got, something like that. I'm not sure.
So what you're talking about maybe, right, in Greek mythology, but in the Gospels, honestly, there's a very natural response. There's a very natural concept of desire, right? Desire is simply expressed, desire is granted. You don't have these kind of consequences like, why did you, which shows us that we shouldn't desire, right? In the Gospels, you really have this very innocent honoring of human desire, right? So what you're talking about perhaps works more in Greek mythology, and I wouldn't be surprised, and we'll talk about that in a second. Milgram, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I just have a comment. Is it possible that I guess the way, I don't know so much about Christianity, but I know that in Judaism, there are things that were allowed in biblical times that are actually explicitly forbidden in the later time periods. So could it be something like that, something that was allowed when Jesus was alive is explicitly forbidden when, I don't know who his contemporaries are, but whoever came after him,
Yes, there is an evolution, and you're right? So what I wanted to do, however, before we get to how Christianity evolves into what Nietzsche is criticizing, I wanted to show, right, that the origins of Christianity actually don't have this problem with desire. They don't have this hatred of the world. You don't have this distrust of human desire. On the contrary, right, you have a celebration of human desire, and you have a celebration of the world, right? Which is why, like I said, Nietzsche gravitates towards the person of Jesus, even though he despises Christianity, right? So then here's a question, right, that Milgram is asking us. What happened? When did Christianity start to shift, right? Anybody know? What happened to Christianity, right? What happened to the followers of Jesus that all of a sudden now we're at a place where everything is wrong? The world is hostile and we shouldn't listen to our desires. How, anybody have any idea how the shift happened? This is a tough question. If you don't have the answer, I'll tell you. But I want to see if anybody. Okay, Wilkes, go ahead.
So I don't necessarily know when the exact shift happened, but I think it was just a misunderstanding of the scripture and kind of going back to Job, seeing God as someone to be feared. So now you have to follow all these rules. You can't enjoy life as it is. So I think just people in the Christian faith or just in religion in general, we kind of have to follow these rules in order to get a good life out of it or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a shift that you're noticing where all of a sudden everything is fearful, right? Everything, we need these strict rules and we need these strict boundaries between us and the world. So Alim is talking about the corruption of the church for money and so forth. Yes, this is part of it, but there's an even earlier shift, which I'm going to explain right now, which is a philosophical shift. In other words, Christianity in its origin is still rooted in Judaism and in Hebrew thinking, which we know from Job, right, is very much rooted in reality, right? Remember, Job, the God in Job is telling him, live, enter life, stop, protecting yourself like this, right? So Judaism in general, at least the Judaism of those texts like Job, is really describing life as something positive that we should enter, right? The shift occurs under the influence of Greek thought. We have to remember the historical context of Christianity. Christianity was born in Judaism, of course, but at the time when the Jews were under the conquest of the Greeks, the Romans, but the Greek culture was everywhere. And so little by little, right, you have this infusion, this entry, this influence of Greek thought. And slowly, slowly, the church is becoming more and more Greek and less Hebrew, and leaving behind, right, this kind of the Hebrew worldview for the Greek worldview. Now, remind me, what is the Greek worldview of the world and of desire? Based on Plato. We talked about this last time. How do the Greeks view the world? We saw this when we talked about the cave. The story, the allegory of the cave. What do the Greeks say about life, the material world, the world of our desires, the things that we eat and touch and desire and sense? What do the Greeks say about this dimension? The dimension of materiality. Let's see. Yes, Leon, speak to us.
So the Greek view of is similar to Plato's allegory of the cave, where basically you're telling about the story about how all the prisoners were facing one direction and that they couldn't see the outside view. I think that's what the Greek is talking about.
And the cave, what is that? What part of our life is the cave?
That's the material realm, I believe.
Exactly, right? The world and all that we desire in the world is the cave, right? This is the realm of materiality. This is the material dimension. And for the Greeks, we have to leave the cave. We have to leave behind the world. We have to leave behind our desires in order to connect to something more intellectual, more ideal, right? We saw this briefly when I did Rumi and we talked about the cave, right? So the Greek thought is constantly saying the world is depraved and we need to rise above this depraved and corrupt state and think about more spiritual, more intellectual things, right? So Christianity, the reason it began to shift is under the influence of Platonism. Slowly, gradually, Christianity began to adopt the Platonic idea, the Greek idea that the world is hostile, that the world is corrupt. And little by little, they adopted the Greek idea that our desires need to be set aside for something higher, more spiritual, more abstract. And that's how we got to where Nietzsche is, right, in terms of Christianity. Stark, would you like to add something?
Didn't we discuss that in the ancient Greek way of thought was that everything in moderation is good? So what, even if Christianity was led in that direction, would then at what point did that go away?
It's a good question, right? So we need to remember, and I didn't say that, so we can't remember, but Greek thought has different facets, right? You have Greek thought, which is very Dionysian, right? Which is excess and, let's have orgies and drink wine until we die, right? So we have that aspect. We have Greek thought, which is, moderation, the middle path, nothing is good, nothing is bad. But then you have Platonic thought, right? Which is clearly saying the world is bad. What we need to do is get out of the world. So you have these different philosophies coexisting in Greek, in the Greek worldview, right? So, and sadly, the church didn't go with Dionysus, didn't go with, the middle way, actually started to follow the path of Plato. So yes, you're right. Greek thought is multifaceted. You have in Greek thought a place for excess, right? You have in Greek thought a place for moderation. And then you have in Greek thought an emphasis on the depravity of the world and moving beyond the world. Does that answer your question, Stark?
Yeah.
So that's the thing, right? And that's why, right, we see here that Christianity became what it became, right? Not because of the teachings of Jesus, which go in a totally different direction, right, as we saw. And you can check for yourselves, right? I would really invite you, read the Gospels tonight, right? Open the text, read the Gospels, see for yourselves, right, what I'm saying. It's later, make sure you write this down, right? Much later, under the influence of Platonism, that Christianity shifted into this kind of attitude which despises the world, which despises human desire. And so what we realize now is that Nietzsche is not so much criticizing Christianity as he's criticizing Plato, or the Plato in Christianity, right? The real target of Nietzsche's attacks is Platonism, embodied, incarnated in Christianity. And by the way, Nietzsche had a huge amount of problems with Platonic philosophy, right? He doesn't only bash Christianity, he also bashes philosophy in his text, especially Greek philosophy, for the same reason, right? So that's my response, right, to Nietzsche. That's the best way I could respond, and in a way it's Nietzsche who helped me see this, right? I mean, we are so used to the kind of Christianity we are taught by the church, of this kind of dying Jesus, and you have to suffer and you have to constantly atone and be miserable and repent, and right? So you can't see the text unless you really start to look at the Christian scriptures with Nietzschean eyes, right? So you see how I'm doing something like Maimonides here, right? Before Nietzsche, I couldn't see all of the joy and the exuberance and the love of life that exists in the Gospels, right? It's because I went and read Nietzsche that I started to look back into the scripture and saw these things that I would not have seen had I just stayed within the confines of the church, right? Are you seeing what I'm saying? Do you see how I had a Maimonides moment? Put your hand in the screen, right? Do you see how important it is to read philosophy for your faith? Right? There are things you will never see in your own faith if you haven't stepped out. I agree with Maimonides on that, right? And so this is the best way, right, for that I thought we could find a response to Nietzsche's criticism of Christianity, is to show that actually originally, right, and in a way this is an invitation, right, to Christians to go back to the original Christianity, right, the Christianity that is taught in the gospel. So in a way, Nietzsche is inviting us back to this original Christianity, which is not yet tainted by Platonism, which hasn't become this kind of austere life hater kind of entity, right? So do you see how Nietzsche in a way can help us become better Christians, right? In many ways, can lead us back into the original way that Christianity was embodied, lived, taught, and so forth. Okay. Now that I've said this, I have 10 minutes to show you Nietzsche's path, right? I've responded a little bit to Nietzsche, best of my ability. Let's go now into his path when it comes to the human desires, which is true. They can be dangerous, right? If you have too much lust, if you have too much greed, if you have too much gluttony, you'll die, right? So what does Nietzsche propose, right? Of course, he's not going to propose the repression or extermination. It's a different path. So go to page 52 and count from the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it says, it never asks. Who is there? Put your hand in the screen. 6 lines from the bottom of page 52. All right, so here he's still criticizing Christianity, saying Christianity, right, never asks, how can we, so this is now Nietzsche's path, right, with regards to the desires. How can we spiritualize, beautify, deify a desire? This is the path. Okay, so let's analyze it. So I'm gonna write it down, right? 3 points: spiritualize, beautify, deify. Okay, so the first approach we can have when we have an overwhelming desire. So by the way, I want you to think, all of you right now, of one desire that is making you miserable because you don't have it, right? Think right now of anything that is obsessing you and making you miserable because you don't have it. Everybody has it in mind? Put your hand in the screen, right? It is very true that very often our desires ruin our lives, right? We desire someone that we can't have. We desire a job that we don't have. We we want to rest and we can't. We want to eat, but we know it's not going to work for our bodies, right? So all of us, to a certain degree, are made miserable by one desire. So let's see how Nietzsche proposes we deal with this obsessive desire, whether it's an obsessive desire for a person or an obsessive desire for something that someone else has that we don't have, right? Or a jealous, right, inclination, or an obsessive anger problem, right? We have anger management issues. Or what are the other ones? Or we have issues with eating, right? You can't control your appetite. Or you're just lazy, right? So all of us struggle, right, with one of these desires. What does Nietzsche propose? So spiritualize. Anybody know what it would mean to spiritualize your obsessive desire? Let me give you an example. Suppose you have an anger problem. You get angry and you have a hot temper. How could you spiritualize this passion in a way as to be able to navigate it? Anybody know? Suraj, think about happy stuff to calm down. Let's see. Close. Let's define what it means to spiritualize. What does it mean to spiritualize? To make something spiritual. So something is material, you make it spiritual. What does it mean to spiritualize? Anybody know? Yes, Suresh, very good, right? In other words, you make it higher. Or yes, Shamalov, excellent too. You connect with it on a deeper level. So you draw out. It's like in chemistry, right? When you have damn, I don't know how the concepts, but you kind of what are they called? Is it condensation? Where the sorry, Suresh. You know when you bring the liquid and it goes up and it stays up and that's what you gather? What's condensation? Is that what it is? Somebody, yes, it's made by boiling. If not evaporation, because then it's gone. Okay, I need to look up my chemistry. let's not do the chemistry. But to spiritualize is to elevate, right? To make spiritual, to make elevated. So now you have an anger problem, you have a hot temper. How do you elevate or spiritualize? Other than kind of, like Suresh, what you're proposing is a little bit of changing your focus. I'm talking about elevating it. So you keep the anger. The anger is good, but you elevate it. You're talking about kind of soothing the anger, right? With the positive thoughts. Nietzsche is saying, no, you take the anger as it is, it's good, and you elevate it. What does that mean? Yes, Leon, very good. Speak to us. Tell us what you said.
I think it's like taking that type of energy, I guess, like your anger, the toxicness, and turning into something that will just make your life even better in a way. Yeah.
Williams, add to that. You're on the right track, Williams. You're right.
Usually they say you have to turn something that you desire into something that motivates you. Saying like if you want to exercise, if you want to be skinny but want to eat at the same time, make it something that you can make it balanced to achieve that goal. Something like that. I can't explain.
Yeah, I like what you said. You turn it into motivation. Anger can become the source of positive action. Right? Imagine you're angry at what you see in society. Your anger can become elevated when you become an activist and you start to deal with this issue. It pushes you to act. It motivates you to change things. And anger, in a way, can become the catalyst for transformation of your society, right? That's the spiritualization. You've taken your anger. You haven't tried to appease your anger. No, the anger is good. And you've turned it into fuel, right, into some kind of motivation for action, for social change, right, for justice. Everybody understand this first point, the way you spiritualize, right? Put your hand on the screen if you're following what I'm, okay, good. Making sure, right? So that's just one way to do it. Now, the second way is beautify. So I need to explain a little bit what the Greeks mean by beautify, because remember, Nietzsche is following the Greek path, not the Platonic path, right? The other path. Now, beauty in Greece has to do with harmony, right? In other words, something is beautiful if it's harmonious, if nothing is sticking out, right? So you can't be beautiful for the Greeks if you have a big nose. You can't be beautiful if you're too tall or too skinny or too broad, right? So everything has to be in perfect harmony for it to be beautiful. So beauty in the Greek mindset is harmony. In other words, balance. Okay, let me write this down. So beauty, right? Something is beautiful if it's harmonious and balanced. There's no excess. Now, let's go back to anger. You have a problem, hot temper. How would you beautify your anger? Again, we don't get rid of the anger. We don't appease the anger. We beautify the anger. What does it mean to beautify the anger? Let's see what you can come up with. Yes, Cruz, talk to us. How would that work?
I'm not sure, but I guess if you're really angry, you should think of something that would balance it out. Like, I'm super angry that I don't have what I have, but you think in a positive way.
Okay, very good, right? Suresh, this is where you come in, right? With this idea of balancing your anger with positive thoughts, right? So what Nietzsche is saying is your anger is okay, but it needs to be beautified. It needs to be made, brought into balance with something else, right? So you're angry, but you should also be in control of your anger, right? And then your anger is beautiful, right? Anger, I don't know if you know people like that. I'm not one of those. When I get angry, it's not beautiful, it's out of control, so I never get angry for that reason. But some people, I don't know if you know them, they get angry in a perfect way. They're composed, they say exactly the right things. How many of you know people like that who know how to be angry like aesthetically, and they're like composed, they're wonderful, and you're like, you're so impressed, and you're pathetic when you get angry, like I am. Right? This is why I don't do it, right? But some people, that's what Nietzsche is saying, right? You become angry in a composed way, dignified way, so that your anger really has an impact, right? Leon, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I have a friend that basically, instead of letting the anger out, he holds his composure and sort of, rather than focusing the energy more on the emotional side, more dealing with logic in a way. I don't know if that kind of correlates to what you're saying, but.
Absolutely, because then you're responding to the person. You're angry, right? You don't get rid of the anger, but you respond in such a sharp way that your anger actually has the impact of, making the other person look like a complete idiot, right? So that's the idea, beautify. Be angry beautifully, right? Last one, deify. What does it mean to deify your hot-temperedness, to deify this fire that is raging inside of you? What does it mean to deify? To deify, by the way, right, means to make divine. What does it mean? What does Nietzsche mean by that? Why would he want anger to be divine, right? Isn't anger supposed to be bad? Why is he now saying it should be deified? What does that mean? Nobody knows. Deified in contrast to what Christianity is doing with anger, right? What does Christianity say about anger? Does it say that it is something divine? Or what does it say about anger? Yes, Harkstark, go ahead.
I mean, I think that the message is just that like emotions are definitely not a negative thing. So just the fact that you can experience negative emotions, but like that's not a bad thing. That's just part of being alive.
You got it, right? Absolutely. Whereas Christianity will say your anger is a mortal sin and it will demonize the anger. Nietzsche is saying, no, anger is part of being human. Anger is beautiful. Anger can be a powerful force for good. Anger is like a storm over the ocean, right? It has beauty, it has grandeur, it has dignity, right? So he's saying, let's stop demonizing and let's start deifying. Let's recognize the divine power of these passions, right? So he's basically saying our emotions, even our negative emotions, are gods. They're beautiful. They're divine. We should celebrate them. But at the same time, we should learn to spiritualize. We should learn to beautify. But let us never forget that they are already divine and beautiful, right? Let's see what Leon has to say. Yes, very good, right? What he's doing is really, you guys are really getting it. He's normalizing these negative emotions that Christianity has demonized. And he's saying, this is part of being human. Anger is good. Lust is good. Greed is good, as long as you know how to navigate them. They're like wild horses, right? If you learn how to domesticate your horse, it's amazing, right? Let's not kill the horse just because it can run off, right? You want to take this wild thing and make it beautiful, make it spiritual, and recognize its divinity. That's the idea. Very good. You guys are really getting it. Okay. So this brings us to the end of our time with Nietzsche. Let me turn off the recording.